English is the most famous language of the world. But from where this language came from is an important question. So, in today's video, we are going to discuss the history of English language. This is chapter number 1, video number 1, Old English, or we can say Anglo Saxon period. So, first of all, we will see the time period. So, basically, Old English or the Anglo Saxon started around 450 AD to 1066 AD. We will discuss the history of English language and literature. English is an international language which is spoken by almost all the countries in the world. But according to the facts, English is the third most spoken language around the world. First position is taken by Chinese. Chinese language is spoken by almost 1.3 billion people around the world. And second position is by Spanish. Almost 485 million people speak Spanish around the world. English got third position with 373 million people almost which speak English around the world. Now we will see the history of English language. Basically, English belonged to the West Germanic branch of the Indo-European family tree. Family tree is basically created to see that which language belonged to which family. English belonged to the West Germanic branch of Indo-European family. From this tree you can see the Indo-European family figure. Basically, Indo-European family tree is divided into many types. So, the history of English language started from here. When three tribes, named as Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, came to British Isles. So basically, these three tribes, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, came from Germany and Denmark. From there, they come to British Isles. These three tribes were warlike and they were original Celtic speakers. So from here, Celtic language is also introduced into British. Now as the time passes, these three tribes share their different dialects with each other. Angels share with Jews, Jews with Saxons, Saxons with Angels, and all. They share their different German and Denmark Isles with each other. Basically, English, in Old English, we say it Englisic. In Old English, English was spelled as Englisc. And basically, this word came from the angels. Angel, land of origin, is known as Angel, Engle. From there, word English is derived from. So this is the small introductory history that by the introduction of those three tribes into British, English language started to emerge. Before in England, the language spoken was Latin and Celtic. From where these two languages, Latin and Celtic, came into British. So basically, it is by Roman Empire. Before in England, in British, there was the rule of Roman Empire. So Roman Empire merchants, Roman Empire soldiers, when they talk to each other, from there a lot of words introduced into the English language. We will take some examples that which are the words which were introduced into the English language by the Roman Empire merchants and soldiers. Number 1 is wine, which came from word wine, Wine. Secondly, candle, These two words, or all the example which I will give in this video, are spoken in today's modern English. Next example is belt. Belt spelling in old and modern English were same. And the last example is wall, which came from the spelling WEALL. Only E is omitted, otherwise the spelling are same. So these are some of the words which are taken by Roman merchants and soldiers. Now, if we talk about the Celtic language influence on the modern English or the Old English was slight. Only some words were introduced into the language, and some words like the name of places or the name of rivers. For example, Kent, York, Dover, Cumberland, Thames, Avon. These are some of the words which are taken from the Celtic language. So from here we can see that Celtic language influence on the English was slight because only the names of some places or some rivers are the same. So now we will talk about the other two important things which affect the British English a lot. Number one is the arrival of St. Augustine in 597 AD into British. By the arrival of St. Augustine in 597 AD, there were a lot of changes that occur into the British, like in culture, religion, administration, social life, etc. Number one, the most important thing, the religion, Christian religion was introduced into British. And secondly, Latin words were introduced into the English language. Now, the words were mostly related to Christian religion like church, bishop, baptism, monk, etc. So, these are some of the words which were introduced by the arrival of St. Augustine in 597 AD. But by their arrival, the new religion, Christian religion, and Latin words introduction have important influence on the English language. Next, we will see the second important major event which occurred and which influenced the language English. Around 878 AD, Danes and Norsemen, which we also call them Vikings, came to British. And by their arrival, a lot of changes occurred. So, by their arrival, many Norse words introduced into the English, which we are still speaking in our today's modern English, and they are most popular and famous words in our daily life. Like the words like skin, sky, egg, cake, leg, window, husband, fallow, skill, anger, flat, ugly, they, their, them, call, die, odd, even. So there are many words. We call them Norse words, which are introduced by Danes and Norsemen called Vikings. So this was also an important event that occurred in English language. Now we will discuss about English literature. We have discussed about English language. We have seen multiple events which occurred which influenced the English language. So English literature, we have to see it in detail. Literature is an important part of one age. So first of all, we will see an example of famous Lord Prayer. Famous Lord Prayer is very famous in the time of Old English. So we will see first two lines of that famous Lord Prayer, which is Fader ur pupi ert on hiophonum. So from these two lines, I think you understand nothing. So these two lines are taken from the famous Lord Prayer, and this writing is of Old English. So in Old English, people used to write like this. So we totally don't understand that what it is mean. Even the native speakers don't understand what it is meant. So, from there, we see that there is the presence of obsolete letters. The letters which are written there are totally not present in the modern English. If I tell you the meaning, so fader mean our father, and pu pi earth on here phenom mean which art in the heaven. So it's totally different from the modern English. And secondly, OE stand for Old English. Old English basically pronounced as written. Now we will see the grammar. Grammar is also a very important thing in any language. So if we talk about noun, yeah, noun was present. Noun used declensions. There were two types of noun, strong nouns and weak nouns. For example, in strong noun, there was word stone. They call that stain, like N stain, D stain, N stain. And weak nouns, word name was pronounced as nama, D naman, A naman. Similarly, adjectives were also flexive at that time. Verb use conjugations, and verbs were also present in two types like strong and weak. And strong verbs give birth to irregular verbs of today. So, this is the grammar structure of that time. I hope you are clear about the Old English till now. Now, we will see a famous example of literature of that time. At that time, one of the most famous literature example is Beowulf. Beowulf is basically an epic. Epic is a long poem of 1,000 lines or thick books. So Beowulf basically contains 3,183 lines, and the writer of Beowulf is unknown. We don't know who wrote this, but it is very famous. And if we see the writing of Beowulf, we simply don't understand a single word because the writing of Old English is totally opposite to the modern English. If we talk about the famous genres of that time, so yeah, poetry and prose were the famous literary genres of that time. There was no novel, no drama, no film, nothing else, only poetry and prose. And the poetry and prose was also limited to the particular topics. Like the poetry was only limited to religion. And in religion, they were talking about riddles, they were talking about charms, they were talking about magics, black magics, etc. So, yeah, poetry was there, but poetry was also limited to one limit. And second is prose. Prose was the second genre of the Old English, and prose was only limited to politics. So only two genres were there, poetry and prose. Poetry was more famous than prose, and they both were limited. If we talk about poetry, poetry was further divided into four types. Or we can say poetry was further divided into four manuscripts. Like there was Exeter, there were Junius, there was Versilii, and at last there was Beowulf. We have already discussed Beowulf before, which consists of 3,183 lines. Basically, it is about moral values, ethics, and all these. And Versilii is about fate, Junius and Exeter are also long epics, long poems. So, in this, we have seen that poetry was further divided into four. Old English or the Anglo Saxons, we can say that it is also known as the Dark or Barren Ages. Why we say that it is a dark or barren ages? Because there was no development on the literary genres, as we have seen that Only poetry and prose were the topics, were the two major genres, and there was no development in them too, because poetry was only limited to religion and prose was only limited to politics. So there was no development in that time. So that's why we say that dark or barren ages. At that time there was a lot of poverty too. So there was no development in that time in anything, so we can say that it is dark or barren ages. So I hope you are clear till now. So we will summarize everything we have discussed in this video. So in this video, we have seen that English language basically belongs to the West Germanic branch of the Indo-European family. Secondly, we have seen that English is the third famous language which is spoken around the world. First is Chinese, and second is Spanish. And third is the English language, which is spoken by almost 373 million people around the world. And thirdly, we have seen by the arrival of three tribes, Angels, Saxons, and Jews, into the British Isles have started the influence of English language. Then we have seen that Roman Empire was ruling before these three tribes, and Roman Empire merchants and Roman Empire soldiers have a lot of influence on the English language. Many words like belt, wine, wall, candle were introduced. Next, as the Augustine arrival in 597 AD brought many Latin words and Christian religion into the British. Then we have seen in 800s Danes and Norsemen, we can call them Vikings, introduced many Norse words like skin, window, husband, them, their, race, old, ugly into the English language. Then we have seen the famous example like the Lord Prayer. We have seen that the words there like feather or pu, p, ton, here, phoneme is totally different from the modern English. Even the native speakers of English think that it is a foreign language. They can't understand what it is written. And at last there was, if we talk about the literature, so literature was also limited to poetry and prose, and poetry and prose was also limited to only religion and politics. So I hope you understand the history of English language. So thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe my channel for further notifications and updates. So this is video number 1 on the history of English language, and we will cover till the modern English till today. Thank you so much. Subscribe my channel.